Welcome to the ASID webinar on the history of the governance, structure, and development of the chapters of the American Society of Interior Designers. The purpose of this session is to educate you on why nonprofit associations utilize chapters in their work and to review the structure and history of ASID's chapter model. Let's begin. By the end of today's seminar, you will be able to explain why nonprofit associations use chapters and some of the traditional structures, to describe the current structure of ASID's chapter model, and finally, to examine the histories and factors that led to the development of our current chapter model. Chapters help foster a sense of belonging and community to an association's membership. They serve as the local face to engage members in activities and initiatives of relevance to their local geographic communities, with the expectation from the parent organization that activities and approaches will align and amplify the central mission of the organization. They also add value in other ways. ASID exists to further our mission of advancing the profession and communicating the impact of interior design to enhance the human experience. And by extension, the chapters of ASID exist to further this mission. In today's busy attention economy, it's difficult to be everywhere at once. Since the inception of associations, creating and engaging local chapters has been an effective way to expand an association's reach and impact. Chapters can act as service providers by holding their own educational programs and networking events, or even publishing their own newsletters or magazines. Chapters can also serve as contributors to the central organization, promoting national services and products, adding to fundraising or lobbying efforts, as well as developing volunteers and leaders who could eventually go on to serve at the national level. And then finally, contributing to revenue activities for the parent organization, such as adding to recruitment and retention efforts and the money that brings in, as well as getting people to attend national programs and participating in nationally created programs that offer revenue shares with the chapter. There are many types of structures for chapter models. The Society's chapter structure follows a very traditional model similar to many other associations. Before we review the ASID chapter structure, let's look at a few key terms about chapter structure that will be used throughout this seminar. First, the central organization, also called a parent, lead, or umbrella organization, is the main organization which chapters or components affiliate with. Chapters are a subset of that organization, historically based around a specific geographic area. A newer term that's gained prominence in associations is components, which are subsets of a nonprofit organization. But unlike chapters, components do not have to be geographic based and can instead focus on a specific topic, specialty, or even a specific subset of the membership. Throughout its history, ASID has focused primarily on creating community through geographic chapters. There are many different traditional structures for how chapters or components affiliate with their central organization. For the purpose of this seminar, we'll zero in on the three most common. The single organization structure is where there is very little legal or operational separation between a chapter and the central organization. Basically, it's one organization with many parts. A parent subsidiary model does have some legal separation, although the central organization or parent generally has authority over governance and policies. Some parent organizations create a legal affiliation agreement that is updated annually, outlining how the parent and child are linked. And finally, a contractual affiliation is where the central organization and the chapters are completely separate organizations, typically both legally and operationally, and may not share governance or policies. ASID is a hybrid between the single organization and a parent subsidiary model. Similar to the single organization model, nonprofit status and legal recognition is mainly given to the larger society. And underneath the chapters, there are also two substructures, design communities, which typically focus on a more limited geographic area or city within a larger chapter, like the Austin Design Community of the Texas chapter, and student chapters, which are connected to specific colleges or universities within a chapter's geography. This page is taken from the ASID bylaws. By our own governance, the professional chapters are required to register as nonprofit membership associations in the states where they conduct operations. But they are also prohibited from incorporating as a separate legal entity apart from the society. This places a greater potential for liability to the society from chapter actions than it would if chapters were separate organizations. In recent years, this has also posed a quandary as an increasing number of states there are legal restrictions against unincorporated entities being granted tax-exempt status, creating a potential obstacle in creating new chapters. The benefit of this model is that it's intended to strengthen the authority of the central organization to keep chapters in greater alignment with the overall mission, initiatives, and approach of the parent organization. This excerpt is taken from the ASID policies. Each chapter's mission statement is set by the society. Each chapter's purpose and activities are set by the society bylaws, and each chapter's strategic plan and its outline and goals are also set by the society. So you can see that we are intentionally structured to position chapters as an extension of the society to help the society accomplish its goals. There's only one set of bylaws and policies that set the governance for the society and its chapters, which can only be changed or amended by the national board or petitioned by the general membership. Chapters are to be operated independently by an elected chapter board, but the chapter is bound by the direction and restrictions set by the society's bylaws and policies. These governing documents are legal requirements dictated by the government and IRS tax code. In exchange for operating as a nonprofit with the privileges and rights that come with it, the society, and by extension its chapters, pledge to follow its own governance. Similarly, all chapter strategic plans are required to start with the society's overarching strategic plan and goals as the foundation as the chapters plan out their year, with the chapter's strategic plan focusing on the tactics that the chapter should be using to advance the society's strategic goals. This model also increases liability to the society since we are one organization. There are items in the policies to help reduce some of these risks, such as requiring all chapters must submit their strategic plans, contracts, and plans for any fundraising to ASID headquarters for approval. To reduce liability and increase alignment to the mission and brand, the society also secures services directly for the chapters that are required by the society's policies, including insurance for chapter boards, as well as for chapters at large, including directors and officers and general liability insurance. We also include website support and hosting for chapters, which includes online member profiles in Find a Pro and Find an IP, and then also legal services, specifically contract review. Then we also provide ASID branded emails for chapter officers to aid in branding alignment, and leadership development training and tools. The cost for the items that are displayed here in red are subtracted from the allocations given to chapters from dues revenue. All of this factors into the financial relationship between the society and its professional chapters. Chapters receive funds from the society based off of member dues and revenue from the online profiles, and then the society charges back some of the cost associated with supporting the professional chapters, as you can see there in red. Let's move on to review the history of ASID's chapter development. In 1975, when AID and NSID merged to form ASID, the organization's chapter structures were merged to form the structure that ASID has now. Minimal changes to this chapter structure has occurred over the years, with no drastic intentional significant reorganization or growth of new chapters. The formation of the chapters during the 70s and 80s were based on member population and geographical constraints. Currently, there are 46 ASID chapters. Practitioners and student members are automatically assigned to their nearest chapter, but they do have the option to switch to any different chapter of their choice, or even to pay a fee to add additional chapters to their membership. Industry partners choose their membership level, national, regional, local, and so on, based on the number of chapters they wish to access. These chapter geographic boundaries originated from the organic structure from ASID's predecessor organizations. Many of the chapters are demographically and geographically diverse. Chapter geographies can be divided into 3 categories. A little over a third of ASID's chapters are state-based, including states outside of the continental U.S., Alaska, and Hawaii. ASID used to have a Puerto Rico chapter, which was disbanded in 2003. A little less than a third of the 46 chapters are multi-state chapters. Many of these chapters group states with a smaller concentration of ASID designers with more populous regions. This also allows the society to have coverage across all 50 states and the District of Columbia. In terms of grouping a smaller concentration with a larger concentration, one great example of this is the Minnesota chapter, which mostly includes members across the Minnesota state area, but also includes the few members that are located in North and South Dakota. You'll also see in the multi-state chapters that this is where one of the ASID chapters has boundaries in Canada, the New York Upstate Canada East chapter. And finally, the remaining chapters are formed around metro or regional areas, in many cases giving some states multiple chapters, including California, which currently has 7 chapters, formerly 8, Florida with 3 chapters, and Arizona, Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas each have 2 chapters apiece. To get a sense of the concentration of designers by chapter size, headquarters staff categorize chapters in the following categories. Very large, which could include between 500 to over 1,000 designers, which typically include populous metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, Miami in the Florida South chapter, New York City, and the Metro Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Maryland region. And it does include some state chapters. Next are the large chapters, which are typically between 250 all the way up to 499 members. The mid-sized chapters at 150 to 249 members, which includes many of the multi-state chapters. And then small chapters of about 150 designers or less. A national committee called the Chapter Support Team exists to provide peer-to-peer support and guidance to chapters, as well as to provide regular reporting to the national board. Made up of former chapter leaders, this group communicates directly with chapter presidents, but can also be a great resource for other chapter leaders as chapter issues arise. This is also the leadership group that most often makes recommendations to the national board about changes to chapter structure, such as disbanding, merging, or adding chapters. As mentioned previously, most of ASID's chapter structure came from the chapters that existed from our preceding organizations. And in more than 30 years, few new chapters have been founded or previous chapters disbanded. And in cases when new chapters were founded, in most cases, they are chapters that were added in states that already had chapters or spinoffs from larger state chapters in states like Texas, Florida, and California. Puerto Rico is the only past chapter with the distinction of being in an established U.S. territory as opposed to a U.S. state. It was disbanded due to difficulty in being able to support and sustain at the same level as the other U.S. state-based chapters. In more recent years, there have been mergers when some chapters experienced sustained difficulty in maintaining governance requirements. And some chapters also have affiliates within the chapter called design communities. Design communities do not need to maintain quorum, submit tax returns, or hold elections because the chapter board is taking on all of those legal responsibilities and risk. A little less than a third of ASID's chapters have design communities. There are about 300 student chapters, of which around 200 are considered active. An active student chapter is defined as having 10 or more members. ASID's policies state that the educational institution must be accredited by the appropriate regional or national institutional accrediting body. As we review our student chapters, those that fall below, the number of 10 members are considered in the red zone and placed on a need assistance list. Around 2 to 3 new schools a year inquire about starting an ASID student chapter. Similar to the society at large, most policies changes for the chapters have focused on legislation, governance, operations, and managing the financial resources of the organization. The earliest changes in the 70s focused on supporting chapters' grassroots efforts to impact local legislation, as well as the adding of a subgroup within the chapter structure, then called associations, which would later be renamed design communities. The 80s and 90s saw a lot of attention on the structure of chapter leadership training and support, with changes to how chapters provided feedback to the national board and changes to the National Volunteer Committee that supported the chapters, now called the Chapter Support Team. These types of discussions have continued into the 2000s as the National Board has often reviewed the impact and return on investment of chapters to helping the society as a whole accomplish its mission. The society has grappled with the tension between finding more effective ways to support chapters while also managing issues related to cost, inconsistency, and brand alignment across the organization, and focusing on alignment and creating a consistent brand experience is something that has more frequently been brought up in the more recent years. And you especially see this in the pillars of the 2017 to 2020 strategic plan in the Living the Brand and Unifying Communications pillars of the strategic plan. Over the years, ASID's chapters have experienced ongoing problems with various issues that are potentially detrimental, which are similar to issues that other associations have also experienced with their chapters. These issues can include personality conflicts amongst chapter leadership, which can often lead to difficulties in succession planning and recruiting new leadership, and the fact that chapter board members are most likely to be individual practitioners or sole business owners, which can sometimes limit the perspective on some of the chapter boards. There's also a great variability in the effectiveness of the staff contracted by chapters, called chapter administrators, in part because ASID headquarters does not have a direct role in the selection of this chapter staff. There's also issues with inconsistent brand compliance, which affects the alignment with national programming, approach, quality, and the level of financial control. And also, effective, consistent training programs have proven to be costly to the society. Competition with IIDA, NKBA, and other similar design organizations and their chapters has also created increased competition. Difficulty in getting feedback on association issues from chapters has led to disconnects between members and ASID at large, and components do not always connect with each other as often as needed. So from chapter to chapter, or even from professional chapter to student chapter, there's often a breakdown of communication. Since 2000, the National Board has held major discussions on these issues, regularly if not multiple times a year. And going back even before that, the topic of chapter management and effective chapter use was a frequent discussion held by the board regularly. Also, as chapters begin their strategic planning process in the spring, in order to meet the August 31st deadline imposed by the ASID policies, it can be difficult for chapters to recalibrate to emerging opportunities or threats identified by the society that sometimes occur after a chapter has formed its strategic plan. Chapters are one of ASID's largest source of creating community across the design profession. Shifting from an organic reactive approach to a more strategic intentional approach could help the society address many of the recurring issues and themes brought up during this presentation. Chapters are also incubators of some of the society's most passionate and engaged members. Engaging them in effective and more innovative ways while also recalibrating against return on investment could help propel the society to the next level. Included on the screen are also some additional resources that are of interest when viewing ASID's chapter development evolution, including a chapter analysis that was completed in time for the ASID board book in October 2012, as well as the extension of that, which was completed by a McKinley Marketing ASID product assessment that was shared at the ASID January 2014 board meeting. Thank you for your time today. We hope you've gained a greater understanding of ASID's chapter structure and history and have found today's presentation helpful.